Let me just start off by a little bit about myself and my experience. I'm a 1976 graduate of Cal State Hayward, now known as Cal State East Bay, and uh, very happy to see a few of my classmates from that era. And we do have some things to share. I'm very proud to see the newer faces joining our ranks here. What we'll do is that we'll go around with all of our panelists to allow a chance for them to introduce a self-introduction. And just as a note, this particular session, this Zoom session, is being recorded. And we want to be able to share that with others. And just that's more of an announcement for those who you should be noting that, yes, we are recording this so that we can share it with others. But I'm going to look at my list here. I'm going to start with Stacia Eckles, a little bit about just your time at the university and about your activism. So start off with Stacia, please.
Okay, hi everybody. My name is Stacia Eckles. I recently graduated from Cal State East Bay with a degree in psychology. And my time at East Bay was great. I was able to be engaged in so many different communities and be a part of so many different outreach programs and protests and meetings and things of that sort. And it gave me like a good idea of like the world that I could potentially go into. I want to be a social worker and work with the Black community. And so East Bay definitely gave me that opportunity to like get my feet wet, be in different avenues. So like Black people who were on the front lines protesting, Black people who were in cabinet meetings, Black people who were doing community service and were leading their communities. So I definitely would say that East Bay has changed my perspective on the Black community, and it's definitely given me leadership skills that I don't think I would have been able to get anywhere else. In terms of activism, I was kind of talking about this a little bit before the call, but activism has kind of been like engraved in who I am as a person. Just conversations with my dad and my mom, educating me on certain things that they felt was necessary for me to know as a Black woman. And so when I got to high school, I was a part of BSU, I was part of different leadership things, and then when I got to East Bay, I wanted to be very intentional. And so doing the same thing, joining BSU, I'm a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. I also worked on campus, a bunch of different things. So activism has been a part of my identity for a long time.
Very good. Thank you, Stacia. I'm going to call on next Mr. Larry Brooks. Larry, a little introduction and a little bit about your time at East Bay, Cal State Hayward, and your role as an activist.
Oh, well, first, I just want to thank everyone for having me here. I'm really honored to be a part of this historical event, and I want to also thank my Student Unity Coalition alumni for their work and honor the ones that have gone on to be with our ancestors, Paula McCullen, Nalita Whittle, Howard Ransom, and E.T. Bari Zulu. So how did I start my activism? It started when I saw my mom as an activist crying when news broke that Martin Luther King had been murdered. I had to ask her who he was, and at the time I did not know much about Malcolm X either. I got a black leather jacket and started wearing Huey Newton and Eldridge Cleaver, Angela Davis, and other Black Panther buttons, but I really did not have an in-depth understanding of what they did regarding becoming the national model for free breakfast programs and free health clinics and testing for sickle cell and childbed poisoning. But that knowledge of Black history in the making would come later when I came to what was then called Cal State University Hayward. And that's when I began to take courses in the Black Studies department, and I became even more of an activist. What that led to in terms of my activism, which can take many forms, but in regards to the history of Cal State East Bay, it took the form of me joining the Student Unity Coalition that brought together students from Black Studies, what was then called the Chicano Studies Department, Native Americans, Middle Eastern, and even a few white students. And I do mean only a few back then. We came together and we sought to change the environment there at the university by running a multi-ethnic slate for ASB Student Council, having students sitting in on the academic senate and bringing what was termed radical speakers to the campus for events such as Black History Month, and holding protest rallies and marches, and on occasion even occupying some buildings like the campus theater. So that's where it started. And once I left the campus, once I graduated, I continued my activism, participating in various types of social community based organizations such as the Birthing Project in Sacramento, addressing Black infant mortality. Also getting involved in Closing the Gap, which is a program that helps to close the academic achievement gap for primarily African-American males, but we cover all groups. And then I'm the director of the Alameda County Child Lead Poisoning Prevention Program. And we try to address issues related to housing and how it affects the health of individuals, which primarily has negative impacts on people of color, and which is what we're seeing now, especially with the COVID crisis, as far as how it's affecting people of color and the pre-existing conditions that oftentimes are linked to the housing environments that they live in.
Thank you very much, Larry. Quite a history of activism that you bring. This panel, we're glad you're here as well. Alyssa Steverson, I'd like to call on you next for an introduction.
Hi, thank you so much. My name is Alyssa. I graduated from Cal State East Bay back in 2017. And my activism started at a very young age. But it honestly wasn't like rooted in Blackness initially. It started like in my community, where like our water supply was trash at the end of the day. And like when I was younger, I did a piece of art, and I won a competition, but I also like found out that I was able to bring awareness to what was going on in my community. So that's where my activism started. But when I got to East Bay, I was kind of surprised when I first got there as to how many Black folks were there, but weren't entirely connected. So my activism really started and was rooted in being able to build a community and unite one another through Black at the Bay, through events, through protesting, through conversation, through debates, lots of debates. So that's where like the bulk of my activism has been. And I'm actually excited to kind of get back into that because lately I've been more focused into media activism, and it's definitely a different field, and I need some help there. So I'm excited to be here, to be able to learn from everyone, to be able to enhance what I've been trying to do and what I have done, and hopefully what we can all do together.
Very good. Thank you, Alyssa. Tayimba, I'd like to call on you next to provide an introduction.
All right, thank you. Thank you for having me. So again, I am Tayimba Jelani. Let me say first out the gate that I am my ancestors. I think that's important to acknowledge that I'm here because I'm standing on the shoulders of a whole lot of folks who put in a lot of work and sacrifice, you know, so that so I could be up on that campus. So with that said, it all started at Berkeley High, and I bring that up because at the time, Berkeley High School had one of the only Black studies curriculum or departments in the country. So, and that was under Richard Navy's, and he had a relationship with Oba Tashaka at San Francisco State. And they put together a Steps to College program. And with that Steps to College program, it really was an African Studies curriculum that I took in senior year. And that really launched my evolution. So by the time I got to Cal State Hayward, I was ready to, you know, I watched for a little bit, kept studying, and then eventually joined up with the BSU/African Student Alliance. From there, went to the National Association of Black Accountants, and later founded, more recently in 2011, founded a nonprofit called Life Courses with actually one of my colleagues from Cal State, Nicole Felix, and Shawnee Blevins from San Francisco State. So our nonprofit works with middle school students and their families around the issues of financial literacy.
Thank you very much, Tayamba. Next, I'd like to call on Jordan Leopold. Jordan, let's hear from you. A brief introduction.
Great. Well, first of all, thank you all for having me. It's truly an honor to be here with you all, and I'm really just connecting the generational gap and looking at that from an activist standpoint. So I'm a Hayward native, did all my education here in Hayward, and I went to East Bay, studied economics, and during that time when I was going through university, I was part of multiple organizations, from student government to the Taekwondo team and various other clubs and fraternities and stuff. And in 2014, the way that I approached leadership changed, because that was the year that Eric Garner had died. He was murdered. And that particular moment set off something deep in me, where I needed to address the struggle of being Black, not only like with my friends, but like I needed to contribute to the greater effort that was taking place at that time. And so that was really the start of everything else that came after. And so with that, I had connected with the Anti-Police Terror Project, which is based out in Oakland, and organized with Kat Brooks, Terha Ak, and many other activists during that period. And the energy that we had was consistent. We were on a mission. It was even to the point to where we were not only organizing within Oakland, San Francisco, but the greater Bay Area. And the height of that was where I realized, this is serious work that needs to be done, was when I sat on a panel with Elisa Garza, the founder of Black Lives Matter. I had the chance to kind of talk about what it means to use our social capital in order to push and address these issues amongst those who we have ties to. And so my activism started there, and it was more off campus, but not too short after. I was doing a lot of work on campus. I actually organized with Alyssa on trying to bring a African-American resource center to East Bay's campus, given the educational disparity between African-American students' graduation rates in comparison to other ethnic groups. There was a need, I believe there still is a need, in order to have resources for Black students. And that was our effort of trying to bring about that. And so fast forward to now, I'm actually helping to coordinate different Hayward-based leaders in order to form what we now established to be the Hayward Community Coalition, which has regular community members, community organizers, political candidates who are looking to actually make a change within their community, educators and students and so forth, who have come together to really unify the energy that's here in Hayward, and how to be very pinpoint in terms of bringing about that change on a local level. Because a lot of people think that a lot of the issues are national and state and so forth, but a lot of the things that we feel happens because of local decisions. And so we've been able to mobilize through community education, and then be able to direct the community towards speaking to, applying pressure to city council and school boards and so forth. And so that's kind of where I'm at right now. And I'm really focused on the community education and engagement aspect by leveraging social media, because to end off my intro, I think that social media and the internet is really an activist's wildest dreams if they were from the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And so why not use it to connect and push a statement?
Amen to that, Jordan. I wonder what it would have been like if we'd had that ability to put things on media back then. Thank you very much. Just as a note, I'm going to reference a couple items that are in the chat there. One of them is Shani Blevins. Thank you for posting. That's the lifecoursesinc.org website that I think Tayumba had mentioned there. So that's available for all the attendees as well as for the panelists. And just as a note from Natalie Ingram, who is just noting that a group of faculty and staff is trying to connect with current student organizations to bring back the effort for the African American Resource Center and into this school year. So it's good to hear that. So thank you. I have a question, and for any of the panelists, I've got it on the screen so that you can either raise your hand where you are or use the raise hand function in Zoom. But the question is about mentors that you've had both on and off campus that have supported your activism. Tell us a little bit about those on or off campus mentors that have continued to support your activism. And I'll take any of the panelists in any order. Just let me know raising your hand or the raise hand function on your Zoom. Larry, go ahead, please. And unmute, don't forget to unmute.
Thank you very much for reminding me. In terms of mentors, one of our mentors back in '73 when I arrived on campus was Art Scott. But one of the reasons why the Student Unity Coalition came into existence was because as students, we were starting to watch the systematic oppression of ethnic faculty staff. You know, they were our mentors. They were supporting us. They were teaching us. And yet, you know, Black instructors at that time were being eliminated through the tenure process. We had a Black woman who was in the student activities department who was helping us put on different cultural activities, who kind of got pressured and intimidated into leaving. The white person who was assigned to us, he was not very supportive. And so that was one of the reasons why we did the things we did, because we wanted to support the faculty and staff and keep them there because we knew it was in our best interest to have them there. Now, at the same time, we recognized that the faculty and staff were typically limited in how much they could support us. In some instances, they had to obey policies and procedures and rules that we often saw were being bent for the white students. And so we understood they were under pressure, you know, just the simple realities that they were there to work, get a paycheck. And so there was some parameters where they couldn't exceed, but that's where we saw our job as activists, was that it was up to us to try to change things for them, to make things better for them so that they could be better for the students that were going to follow behind us. But we were kind of impatient, honestly. And so I'm really thankful for the fact that even though we kind of pushed faculty and staff pretty hard during the days we were there, people like Art Scott stayed in touch with us and continued to be a role model, because we were able to watch some of the things he was doing when he left the campus. And we were always taught that the university was a microcosm of the greater society. And so what you did on campus was things that you should be trying to do when you left the university. And so we were able to see some of the things that he was accomplishing. And so that continued to be a role model for us. And we really valued that in terms of learning the importance of strategy and planning and how to operate within the greater society. Something that I've observed now in terms of what has gone on with like the 99% movement, Occupy Wall Street, and the failures of that protest movement, because they weren't very strategic. They didn't plan. They just marched and they occupied properties, but they didn't really come up with a plan. And it's one of the things I'm observing now with the Black Lives Matter movement, and watching to see what their plans are going to be beyond the marching.
Larry, you bring up one of the giants, not only here at Cal State East Bay Art Scout. He's a graduate and he continues to be active, and appreciate you bringing him up as well as the reference there. To our newest panelist, Mr. Richard Rodriguez, we're going to get to your introduction soon. We have a question that we're talking about mentors who have continued to help and support our activism, either on or off campus. And that's the question before our panelists right now. Any others want to weigh in on that particular question?
Yeah, just to piggyback, and I know Monica told us very clearly, don't start telling a bunch of stories, boring all of these people. So I am not going to tell the story, but I will, just to piggyback off what Brother Brooks said. It's important for the faculty, and I'm told there are a lot of faculty and staff that are on this call right now. It is important for you to rally around these students now, because you know, the activism, the leadership that they're showing, it requires a lot of work and a lot of sacrifice as well. But really, to get down to it, there may come a time when you need some support from those students. And kind of like Larry said, we had, it was clear, it was hands off to anybody who was considered to be a BSU consultant, advisor. You mess with them as a faculty or staff member, then we were coming to your office, coming to your desk. We're setting off fire alarms if we have to, but we did not want our faculty and staff being mistreated, because again, they supported us, so we supported them. So I just want to encourage any of the faculty and staff that are listening now, please get behind these students. And even if you don't believe 100% in what they're doing right now, because trust the older generation, they had been through much of what we were doing, and they could see some of the errors of our ways, but they let us grow. And they let us grow and gave us advice on how we should move, things to take into consideration, so that when we bumped our heads against the wall, because eventually it was going to happen, you know, they were there to pick up the pieces and kind of show us, you know. So keep those doors open is what I would say.
All right, all right. Thank you, Tamba. Alyssa, see your hand there?
Yeah, I wanted to like piggyback off of all of that. When I like first started my activism over at East Bay, like I started off like real radical. I'm like, oh, off top, like I have these demands, like I'm about to throw them at this person, that person, like we're good. But then it got out there, and a couple of like faculty and staff found out, and they like reached out to me. And so like with the help of people like Marguerite Henricks, Monica Brooks, Stan, so many other faculty members and staff members that were able to really put emphasis on the organization part for me. That was super key, and that was super helpful, because it's something that I continue to implement, where if I decide to do something or speak out about something, I have to have a plan of action, and I have to let people know like what's next, so that we are not just doing anything in vain, so that we are not just acting upon emotion and trying to get things done through emotion, but trying to actually be organized and make sure that like we have a step 1, a step 2, step 3, and step 4. So I'm super grateful for all of the mentors that I had. And then on top of that, like myself and a lot of other students felt similar to Tayimba, where like we were writing for our faculty and staff. Like if anything was going to happen to them, or if we knew somebody was coming for them in any type of way, like whatsoever. So it always went hand in hand.
All right, all right. And probably quite a few of those faculty, staff, mentors, supporters are no doubt out there as a part of the participants in this particular panel discussion. Stacia, I see your hand up, please.
Just to once again piggyback off of that, special shout out to Miss Monica Brooks, Dr. Allison, LaRon McCoy. Like I'll say for me, I didn't know that faculty and staff really cared like that. I always thought like, okay, it's students, because these are the resources that we need. These are the things that we want to have so that future generations are going to be okay. So I was under the assumption that we were doing it ourselves. And those were faculty and staff, just to name a few, that were like, no, actually, let me help you. And just quick story. I and like 2 other students were sitting in on meetings in terms of getting the African American Resource Center. And one faculty, Dr. Allison, stayed after, and she was like, she pulled us to the side and she was just like, you know, I see that you guys are really dedicated to making this thing come to fruition. Like, what can I help you with? What can we do? And so we ended up, based off of that conversation, ended up expanding the Sankofa program while waiting on the African American Resource Center. And just using that as a resource, I was able to get a job through that. So was a few other students. And then also being able to like immediately impact like the education aspect like of the Black students. Like, it was just amazing. Like, having faculty that was like, let me pull you to the side. I actually see that you're doing something, so let me help you. Like that investment and being able to see how much that impacted like the rest of the Black community. There was Black students that didn't even know that they had resources that were so common or so common sense to us, I guess you could say. And we were really able to make an impact. So that just made me more excited to see how the African American Resource Center is going to be able to impact those future students as well.
Good. Thank you, Stacia. And also appreciate the acknowledgements of all those who are active with you, active before you, and in support of all these particular areas. We're going to take a slight pivot to introduce our panel member who's just joined us. That's Mr. Richard Rodriguez. A chance for you to just tell us a little bit about your early incidents of activism and about your experience at Cal State East Bay. A little brief introduction. Go ahead, Richard.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
What's up, guys? My name's Richard. Graduated in 2019 from Cal State East Bay. And the question was, when was my initial steps into activism? Or that was the question, correct?
Yes.
Well, I honestly didn't. I feel like I advocate a lot for the community, but I don't necessarily feel like an activist personally. I don't know if that makes sense. I do have a lot of beliefs and morals and principles that I stand on, and I'm willing to go over the top to defend them. But I didn't really realize that I was an activist until Miss Monica Brooks had sent me the invite for this panel. You know, I guess my first real step into it was after George Floyd was murdered, and you know, the protest was about to happen in Oakland, and I just approached all of my fraternity brothers like, hey, what's the plan? Are we gonna go there? What do you guys want to do? Like, came around, it was a cool conversation, and it came around, well, this is what I want to do. I want to go and give medical supplies and watch out for people, make sure everybody's good. Like, and that just kind of unfolded into like something where people started donating a lot of money to us to like go and continue doing that and donating medical supplies. And, you know, and it's kind of just something that just happened. I never really, you know, I've always personally been obsessed with, you know, just chasing money and stuff like that. But I think there's a turning point in everybody's life where they start to believe certain things and stand on certain things. And I guess just recently was a turning point in my life to start, you know, I just believe personally, like the service that matters is the service that inconveniences you, you know? So it's something that's manifested into my life, and to now I guess I'm an activist. You know, I'm sorry if that's like disrespectful to you guys or anything, but you know, I do have a lot of opinions and a lot of ideas that I would like to share as well. But yeah, I don't want to take away too much time and all that.
All right, we appreciate it, Richard. You know, activism will strike in various ways, and it's not necessarily a club that you have to have a special experience or initiation in order to belong to, but you'll hear a variety of experiences that'll help clarify that.
Yeah.
Another question I have for the panelists, and that is, how do you imagine unity across the diverse identities within Blackness? What are some of your thoughts, or as you could foresee or imagine unity across the diverse identities within Blackness? And you may have some good examples from some of the recent activities, protests, outcries that are going on. And I'll take hands up either in person or from the hand there in the participants area. Jordan, go ahead.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think that, hey, by the way, Richard, you're giving some feedback. You might want to put your mic on mute. Yeah, you're good. Cool, right on. Yeah, it's a really good question. I think that the biggest thing for Black people to realize about other Black people is that they're Black, right? And that even though they may not share the same exact experience, but there is commonality in terms of what they experience as being a Black person, as being seen as a Black person, right? And there, I think really the way to unite, you say Black people from like unique backgrounds or unique identities is to acknowledge those different identities and acknowledge those different struggles, because there is a lot of intersectionality, right? Like my experience as a Black man is different than my experience as if I were a Black woman, right? Or a Black trans man or Black trans woman, right? Or even being a fair skin versus dark skin, right? Or having come from a rough upbringing versus a nice and comfortable upbringing, right? And so I think it's important to understand that we all come from different walks of life, but at the end of the day, like our ancestors came from the same place. And I think that, you know, again, just giving that unconditional love for your people is really important. And I think that, you know, historically, because we were able to unite as a people, that we were able to make a lot of progress that ultimately helped other demographics, other ethnic groups. And so I think that by understanding that if we can make progress as a people, that ultimately we're making progress as a society. And so I think that's really how I think that we can unify different types of Black folks.
Good, thank you, Jordan. Anyone else imagining unity across the diverse identities within Blackness? Larry?
Oh, okay, I'm going to venture to go a little bit beyond within our Blackness and just in terms of other races, you know, in terms of the things that we did to bring people together, our brown brothers, our Native American brothers, because when you really look at our history, Black folks are in all that. We're in that mix everywhere. All over the world, we end up, you know, playing a role. And as Jordan pointed out, oftentimes we end up, you know, leading the other groups in terms of providing them with direction. And I think in terms of our history with Student Unity Coalition and bringing back together all those different ethnic groups, and even some of our own Black folks who had, as Jordan said, different experiences and different points of view on some things, but we were able to find common ground. Not always, you know, kind of like with the Black Panthers and some of the stuff that they were doing with the Young Chicanos for Community Action, the group that later became known as the Brown Berets. They didn't always agree on things, you know, there were some things that they did together, and then there were some things that they did separate. That's what I like in terms of what I see with the Black Lives Matter movement now, is that it is so diverse, and there's more power in that diversity because, you know, when Black Lives Matter movement started in 2013, it wasn't getting much traction. And granted, unfortunately, it did take, you know, these murders to take place with Aubrey and, you know, with George Floyd to really start getting things rolling. But at the end of the day, one of the reasons why it is really gaining so much power now is because it's much more diverse. Many more different races are involved in those protests. That's also one of the weaknesses too, because unfortunately, just like with the Black Panthers, you can have folks who infiltrate a movement and undermine it. And so that is another one of my concerns as far as the Black Lives Matter movement, is Black folks staying in control of that movement. And it's nice to have other racial groups being supportive of it, but at the end of the day, we have to still lead it.
Good points, Larry. I see Richard's got a hand up there. Richard, go right ahead.
Is my mic on? Yep.
Mic's on.
I think that everything he said was actually was encompassing a lot of the things that I was thinking. You know, there's a lot of rumors or conspiracies that there is someone else running the Black Lives Matter movement for their own motives and intentions and all of that. And I think that, you know, it's important that these types of movements are ran by the people that they represent, you know. And if there's anybody that's watching this panel right now, you know, my ideology, I'm Hispanic and Black. My mom is Black and Hispanic. My dad is Mexican. But it's a slippery slope is basically like my whole idea behind the Black Lives Matter movement. It's you know, once they kill all the Black people, basically, they're gonna go after the next set of people, which would be the brown people. And after they kill all the brown people, they would go after the next set of people, which would probably be the more fair-skinned people like Asians or something like that. It'll go all the way down until there's nothing but working class white people left. And at that point, you know, it's proven through history that the rich and the poor will always have strife. So all of those people will be killed off as well. So for anybody watching, I don't know how many people are on this panel, but the purpose of the Black Lives Matter movement is, to me, is really that the killing of Black people is a slippery slope, because it doesn't just stop at Black people. You know what I mean? It trickles down, and it will trickle down to every other demographic until it's only the rich eating each other alive at that point. But yeah, that's just an opinion I wanted to share.
Okay, it's kind of a bleak look, but not off track there. Well said. Well said. Any others on this particular question? I do want to touch on something that started in the chat there, and it has to do with the those that are supporting student clubs and organizations and their role in that. Let me see if I can get back to the original question here. Chris, I'm going to read your question here. It's, do faculty play a mediator role between the institution and the students to make sure the students refrain from making something too radical happen, kind of playing a pacifist role? And there were a couple of panelists that weighed in on that. I don't want to let that go too far away without others getting a chance, if they would like to weigh in on that. The role of the of some of the advisors to student clubs and organizations. What hasn't been? What would you like it to be? Any panelists want to weigh in on that?
So I've seen it a few different ways, actually. And we were the benefit of one person who was really considered to be more on the inside. And we knew he was an ally of ours, but no one else knew. So it was fortunate enough that he was able to give us some information that was critical to how we were moving on campus. But that was just something that was between all of us, you know. So if any of you are familiar with the spook who sat beside the door, you know, there are some people who are on the inside who are allies, you know, who that's just what they do, but they played their role. And so maybe you're that person. Maybe you're somebody who does really work on being an intermediary with the university and, you know, advocates for the student. It's really up to you and what you as a faculty and staff member are comfortable doing. But we are certainly looking for you to, if you have questions, ask the students what they need help with. Don't make assumptions. Go to them and have a dialogue, because oftentimes that's where problems start. The faculty and staff think they know best, and maybe you do, but until you get some input and the students feel invested and feel loyal to you, then they may not be receptive at your, the initiatives that you take on their behalf. Or you could be completely off base and then you lose their loyalty anyway. So I think there are a few different ways to go, and it's just about what you're comfortable doing at that moment.
Okay, all right. Any others? Alyssa?
I just wanted to touch base on it. I feel like when it comes to like the student mentor, student faculty relationship, I feel like you know your yard or you know your campus. You know what it looks like from like a student perspective, but I think it's also very key to understand that insight from somebody who may have been there longer than you or may have a different perspective from you. So I feel like with my personal experience of my like radical situation being pacified, essentially, I felt like it was, personally, I felt like it was beneficial. And one of the reasons why I felt like it was beneficial was because it allowed us to organize in which we weren't necessarily organized. And then on top of that, I felt like there was a potential for that overall movement to lose soldiers due to just being radical, due to just not having a structure that was given to me by my mentors and faculty. So I think it's kind of like, it's kind of give and take where you are understanding your environment and you're understanding your students, and there can be like a beautiful balance between the two where one side is listening to the other, faculty is listening to students, and students are listening to faculty, to where that you guys can collaborate to bring forth like the biggest and the best effort as a unit than separate.
That's a good description there. There's some cases where mentors or advisors can co-opt, if not hijack, a particular student initiative, taking it into another direction. And one of the ways that faculty can be, and other staff mentors can be supportive, is by listening. And one of the best things that I know I've experienced in my time as a staff member is to listen and understand that the passion, the direction, the no compromise approach that many of our students have is exactly what we need. And the role that students can take is one that many faculty, many staff cannot take. And so there is an opportunity for us to find our way to best support, as you and Tayemba have indicated. Any others want to weigh in on this particular area about mentors? Richard.
I just want to take a moment to really thank Miss Monica Brooks because everything that we're saying a staff member should be is everything that I've seen from her. So if you're listening, Miss Monica, I want to thank you. You know what I mean? You never gave up on me, especially with my ideologies and the way that I handle business. And, you know, I would hope to see more staff members like her in those positions because she always kept us informed and always kept us updated and always put us on to little things that were going on campus to make sure that we were getting the full, you know, benefit of just being on campus. So, you know, I really appreciate her. And yeah.
Good, thank you, Richard. That kind of supports what Alyssa and Tayemba are saying about having that additional inside information that can be very supportive. It's a translation of sometimes the roadmap so that you don't run into the roadblocks. Larry, looks like you're anxious to jump in there.
Yeah, because I do want to bring up how important it is for students to put themselves in position to get the information, because, you know, it's great that sometimes we have that spook who sits by the door that can leak information out to the students, but sometimes the students need to get it for themselves. And that was one of the reasons we all ran for ASB Council, so that we would be more privy to what was going on with the budget. I was one of the appointees to the Academic Senate, and I got to sit there when the Academic Senate would meet with the department heads and go over their departments. And one day I watched Dr. France, the then chair of the Black Studies Department, get chastised because the Academic Senate did not believe that students were so passionate about learning Black history that they were getting good grades. And I thought that was ridiculous. The explanation they gave was that they were competing against other universities and they wanted to build a reputation as having a rigorous academic environment. And if his department was giving out too many A's and B's, something was wrong. And that was something that I don't think Dr. France would have been quick to share, that he was being attacked that way. But because I had been appointed by the Student Unity Coalition to be at the Academic Senate meetings, I was able to go out to the community and tell the students, this is what's happening on campus, this is what is happening to our Black Studies department, and we need to do something about it. And I think it's really unfortunate that in the years after we left, the Black Studies department got merged into the Ethnic Studies department, and that seems to have been pretty much the fashion throughout the country, that a lot of Black Studies departments got eliminated or watered down by being mixed in with other departments.
All except San Francisco State.
Where it all started.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. All right. Any others that wanted to weigh in on that particular question? Okay. Next question I want to pose for the panel is, how can those in the Black community who cannot be on the front lines still be effective in helping change systems? So those who cannot necessarily be on the front lines, how can they be effective in helping to change this systemic racism or other systems of oppression? Jordan.
Got it. Can I take this one? Cool.
Please.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that, it's important that not everybody can go to a protest or, be able to meet physically with like a politician or a local representative to like push a cause. So I think that, what you can do by yourself in order to make change is to understand like what are some of the campaigns that are taking place within your community or within a particular issue, right? And then get the information needed for you to, sign a petition or email or call your local representative, or, even just join in on a virtual hangout and kind of talk about your perspective, or maybe even, for example, just like be able to contribute whatever you can or whatever you're best at, right? Like, for example, I'm organizing in the community of Hayward, and we're putting in like part-time hours towards this. Like, it's a second job to some degree, and of course, not everybody can do that. But if you can come out and put 30 minutes, 1 hour of energy into this a week, like that's still something, right? Whether that be you coming to a meeting, taking notes, or again, going back to the power of social media, being able to amplify the messaging is really important. And even beyond just passively getting it out there on social media, which we need to do, but actively having dialogue and conversations with people that you have close ties to in order to ultimately just like uplift our consciousness about these issues, right? So, definitely talk to your family member. If you got a family member that says something out of pocket that's not kind of in line with, what it should be, then, have a dialogue with them, So there's many different ways in which you can actually go about bringing systemic change. But a lot of it comes, what we also need in beyond systemic change is social change, right? How we think about what it means to be Black and what it means to interact with folks that aren't Black, and in every other angle.
Good. Thank you, Jordan. Richard, I see your hand up, and then Stacia, I'll get to you next.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question just so I have more clarification?
Sure. It's how can those who cannot be on the front lines?
Yeah, so sorry to cut you off, but I just remembered. Okay. I feel like personally, I could be wrong, and I'm welcome to anybody cutting me off and letting me know something. But I feel like these movements didn't start really gaining traction until white folks were on the front lines getting hurt and getting injured and advocating for what was happening. If you look historically through anything Black people have tried to do that was progressive, it was always shut down cut off everything. I think that applying that to just like how you said social change, I think social change is also as big of a deal as systemic change, because it can change the narrative at a different level. Like you said, checking that family member, checking that person that's expressing ignorant comments or whatever. I think that, it's been kind of hard for us to gain traction, and it really does take, other people, not just Black people, being involved, because the system has been so against us that, it's kind of sad to see that, it takes other people getting hurt and other people being involved for it to actually gain traction. And I don't know if you guys believe that as well, but I just feel like it's something that I see personally. And so, like I said, allies are important, allies of other races, and, Black Lives Matter is all lives matter. I don't think that everybody has to be on the front lines to make change, but I think that everybody needs to start, checking those friends, checking those people. And I think that Black people are always seen as, oh, you have to be strong, or you guys are strong people, or you guys are, you have a lot of strength. But at the end of the day, there's certain things that we cannot overcome, and it's due to systemic and social racism. And so I think it's going to take other people standing up. It's going to take other people signing those petitions, other people in public spaces checking those racists. It's going to take, it's going to take other people, because it's been a century of engineering this mentality of the demonization of minorities and Black people in particular. So it's like I said, people don't have to be on the front lines, although I do see them being on the front lines has been a direct cause to change now. But I think it also takes, just giving your opinion if it's for the movement. It takes those other people being involved as well. But yeah.
Okay, good. So different perspective there. Stacia, either on that or from the original question, you have the floor.
I would say, how do I say this? Going back to what Jordan had mentioned earlier, just understanding your Blackness as a person, and understanding what that means to you. And I feel like that would give you like the avenue to figure out how you need to be an activist, or how you need to vocalize your opinion. And just like Richard said, everybody is not only are people not, everybody's not supposed to be on the front lines. Everybody's not required to be on the front lines. That fits some people's personalities a little bit better. They might feel like they might be more effective in that area. Some people, it might be going through education. So reading books, educating yourself on what's actually going on, or like the history behind, why we're doing what we're doing. Or if you have, I know me personally, I don't have that many friends that are not Black. And so, but like Richard was saying, like there are other races that play a large role in our progression forward. So if I have other Black friends that might have more diverse friends, okay, us sparking a conversation and that conversation going into that group. So that way there's like a level of advocacy amongst Black people and outside of Black people. So I think above anything, when it comes to activism, like the first step is like acknowledging your Blackness. I identify as Black, so what does that mean to me? I'm a Black person, but I'm interested in this. Okay, how can I use this thing that I'm interested in to actually like make a change for the collective? Because I think sometimes where we go wrong is we get this assumption that activism is protesting and being on the front lines, and that's how things become a trend, because they're not true to who we are as individuals. And so people protest for a week or protest for a day and then go back to what they're doing. No, figure out a way. If that's not what you're doing, if protesting isn't your thing, figuring out something that is going to last long term that identifies you as a Black person.
Like that. That kind of ties into a question we'll have coming up. Tayemba.
Yeah, so for me, same thing. I think everybody can't be on the front line. Everybody should not be on the front line. If you're in an organization, it takes a lot of spokes to make that wheel move. And you got to figure out what your role is. So I'd say for those of you that are, social media heads, if you will, you got to like, you got to share, you got to post. And, we all control our content, and we all, we post and share and like a lot of stuff that's not necessarily moving the needle forward from an organizational standpoint. I've personally have seen enough Black bodies being killed and murdered and drugged in the street. Now I want to see the organizations that are doing the work. And those are the things that I'm looking for people to post. How can you get involved? What can you volunteer and, and do? What can you donate to? This is where the work is. So I encourage everyone to pick one. That's my motto. Pick one. Pick one cause, pick one organization that you believe in, and ask them how you can get involved. Maybe it's working a table at registration. Maybe it's making phone calls. It could be something very basic that organizations need help with. So it doesn't have to be something big and flamboyant and in front of the camera. The folks that really make these organizations move are never on the camera, and they work behind the scenes quietly. So that's my message.
So this notion of allies, and I see a little bit of discussion there in the chat. What are the appropriate roles, if any, for non-Black allies in Black agenda, Black activism? Richard, go ahead.
I think a very important thing is that we get so distracted with presidential elections and stuff like that, and we're always like, go out and vote. We got to make sure you vote. But one thing we are never really knowledgeable about is local elections, local legislation that's being passed in our counties, local legislation that's being passed in our cities and our neighborhoods, and those are the things that affect us directly. Because one, the police are not regulated by the president or by the FBI as much as you like to think they are. They really run their own program. They really got all this money from all of our counties, all of our cities, and all of that. You know what I mean? It could be going towards education, pulling these people out of these holes. I just think that these local elections are very important, and getting the allies involved in these local elections to see what legislation we need as a people to make sure that our neighborhoods are good is very important. And that's something we always look past because we think that voting for the right president is going to change the world. We need to vote for the people that are going to run our cities, run our neighborhoods, and run our counties, because those are the people that may run for president one day. If you look at all these presidential candidates that we've seen in the past decade or some of them come out from being governors of different states, some of them come from being mayors, some of them come from being, you know what I mean? So in that sense, we should look lower and be like, okay, wait, the police are killing people in our city. We don't have any money for our schools. Our president isn't doing shit. I'm sorry for cussing, but this is something we have to look at more. And this is something we have to teach the allies, and something we have to preach to everybody, like, get involved in local legislation. Local legislation is going to change the world. That's just something I truly stand on right now. I think local legislation is really what's going to make this country change, because if they say everything starts from a very small movement, correct? Am I right? Someone knocked their head? No? Mm-hmm. Disagree, agree? Okay. So, and one small thing is changing local authority figures, local budget, things. We need to really be mindful of those things. We get so distracted in everybody's, oh, you need to vote for the right president. No, let's make sure our mayors are good. Let's make sure the city council members haven't been there for 20 years, messing up our neighborhoods and all of this stuff. Let's make sure we know like what's really going on in our neighborhoods. From there, those people, we may be able to promote them into growth and becoming the next president, and I think that that's something we need to educate ourselves on. That's something we need to educate our allies on. That's something we need to push for more, because the police are ran by the state and they're ran by the cities, and we need to abolish, defund, reorganize. I don't know, something. We need to do something about it. And I think that's going to be the most fruitful for the movement. That's what I think.
Right, that all politics being local. That's one angle there. Stacia?
I feel like when it comes to allies, I think we as Black people need to figure out what we are going to require of them first. because I feel like we're not on the same page in what we're allowing them to do and what we're not allowing them to do. I've personally heard, like, some people who are not Black, they've been advocating or they've been protesting, they've received backlash from the Black community. Why are you here? Or you don't deserve a seat at this table, that whole conversation. But then you have Black people that are looking at their non-Black friends sideways because at this time that they're being silent. And so I think like I think the conversation about allies is a reflection of like our inability to be on the same page, if I'm gonna be honest with you. We as Black people, we don't know what we want, or we have this image of advocacy and it's all different. And so I feel like obviously it's not as ideal for every Black person in the world to get together on a Zoom call and talk about how we want everybody to moving forward. But I do think that conversations like these, and then taking these conversations back to our individual groups and then figuring out, okay, this is what we're going to accept from our allies that are in our immediate circles, or these are the things that we want them to do, or these are the things that we're comfortable with allowing them to do, and then giving them that forefront. But I do think that there's a lot of confusion, and I think for myself, like if I was an ally, I wouldn't know what to do either. Okay, you have Black people that are okay with me posting, and then you have Black people that are looking at me sideways. So I don't want to offend anybody, so maybe I'm not going to do anything. So I just think above all, like a mutual conversation amongst all Black people, or Black people that you're close to, and kind of creating, okay, this is what we're okay with and this is what we're not, and then presenting that to our allies.
All right, Black-led, allies follow. Alyssa.
I agree with what Stacia said. I think allies are important, but I also think that it's more important for Black folks as a whole to be organized. And like kind of tapping back into the last question that you had about how those not on the front line can be effective. I think also knowledge of self is key. Knowledge of everything local as well, knowledge of politics, knowledge of everything that's going on around you. But I think knowledge of self is key because like Stacia had mentioned earlier, at the end of the day, movements are important, movements are necessary, but it's also those small things that we do in our daily lives that are key to making change. And also, I feel like one thing that is necessary, because I feel like there's a place and a space for everyone, is a shift in the mindset of like our Black folks. And I say that because I feel like we do tend to have a lot of conversation about how to change a system that wasn't built for us. And so I think that sometimes we can shift that conversation into how can we create a system that is beneficial for us, alongside the one that we have, or separate, whatever the case may be. But I think that that is a conversation that that we should be having as a community, with organizing that and figuring out how we can support our people first, because it's like, how can we ask somebody else to support us? How can we figure out anything outside of us if we don't know our own?
Good point, good point. And along with that, what are the practical ways that we can keep activism on our collective radar to make sure that it's not just a fad or an expression for the day or just for the week? What are some of the practical ways that we can keep activism on our collective radar? Jordan.
Yeah, I think that really that question boils down to is like, how do we sustain what we're doing, right? Like within recent times, it seems like, protests will come in waves, and then, people will get on the street and they hear a lot on the news and social media, and then it dies down, right? Everybody kind of goes back to the okey doke, like, let me go back to my job and focus on, the bare minimum. So I think right now it's really important to kind of identify exactly like the systems in place that we need as a collective, like what Alyssa said, in order to figure out how to continue this. And kind of one of the reasons why I've been organizing in Hayward the way I'm doing and trying to connect other leaders is because just looking at Black people on like a local, state, national level, like there's not really one unifying figure or organization that we can look to in order for us to figure out what to do next. Like in the past we had, MLK, Malcolm, Black Panthers, right? Kind of like spearheading these movements on a national level. But today we don't really have that. Like we have people that are well known that definitely contribute, but they're not taking like leadership. They're not really pushing us as a people in a direction, and then they're not making it clear. So like we kind of have to take that, and as we should take that into our own hands and have that be a community-centered effort. But I think the way in which we can sustain that is, again, understanding what we need, like understanding, you know, what changes need to take place within the current system that we need to fight for, and kind of have that be our North Star. Like for me personally, I think policing and the prison industrial complex, those are the two biggest issues, and the economic disparity and oppression of Black people. I think those three are like the biggest issues, right? So like now we have the macro, now we need to kind of dive into the micro and see what that looks like in terms of actually changing that system that, you know, we now envision. And again, there needs to be organizations that spearhead that and that work towards that. And what people need to do, well, what those individuals or organizations need to do is try to make them as accessible as possible so people can tap in and now be in tune for what's to come next, or, you know, what is the current change within our system, within society, right? Or, you know, giving them direction as to what actions that they need to take in order to bring about that change again. And so I say where, because like here in the Hayward Community Coalition, we're building out something very similar, but on a local level, specifically to address police brutality, but then also just greater Hayward issues. But what I'm doing is taking what we're doing locally within Hayward and trying to think long terms in terms of what that will look like if we apply it to Black folks on a grander scale.
Thank you, Jordan. Richard, I know you want to weigh in on this.
Yeah, I wanted to piggyback off what he said about making the information accessible and comprehensive to anybody, because I think one thing most of our communities lack right now is information and education. So, you know, and, you know, there's that saying, if you knew better, you do better. And there's a lot of us right now that aren't doing better because we don't know better. So like he said, the information needs to be accessible, comprehensive, and, you know, it just, we, on top of that, like he said, policing and police brutality, the prison industrial complex, all that, the socioeconomic state that we're placed in, it's a lot to battle. We're kind of honestly spread thin, you know, on top of a capitalist society. It's hard for us to keep track of what's important. And, you know, it's hard for us to stay, you know, with movements or with things that we stand on and believe, because there's so many things in this world to get us to waver on what we stand on and what our morals and principles are. So I think the key to really staying, I guess, active is to recognize that every day that everything is set up for you to not give a damn about what's going on in the world. And you have to care, you know, you have to care about something. And so it takes, you know, the information being accessible and comprehensive, and just recognizing it, acknowledging it every day that, you know, this is what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, good comments.
And if I may jump in.
Timba, go ahead.
Yeah, and this is what brings me back to the pick one concept. It's so easy to get drained, to get overwhelmed, because there really are 1,000 issues that seem to be plaguing us right now. And if you take all of that in, you're gonna burn out, you know, because I think all of us can talk about, especially those of us who've been around a little longer, we see the cycle. You know, a lot of this is the same stuff just coming back, you know, 25 years later or whatever the case may be. But I think the only way to sustain it is, again, like my cousin, I got a cousin who says, if everybody does a little, nobody has to do a lot. So find you something that's very small, that's in your wheelhouse. Again, one group, one topic that you can put some time into. And if we all, quote unquote, find that one thing, then we'll end up inevitably doing complementary work. But if we just rush out here you know, chest out, guns blazing, figuratively speaking, I think we burn out, we run out of ammunition, and then we're kind of right back to where we started. So I really do just want to encourage those that are listening to find something that you believe in and you want to get involved in. I also want to point out, and this kind of goes back to the allies conversation, the frustrating part for me, and I think for us as Black people, is we are the ones who are being tasked to come up with the solutions for racism. This is our problem, but this ain't our problem. Mentally, there's another group of people who, it doesn't matter where they are on the planet Earth, these same issues seem to come up. So eventually we have to have the honest conversation. What is it about folks that make you want to continue to perpetuate the racism? What's going on mentally in your psyche that you just want to, seeing a free Black human being somehow wells up something in you that you're not happy unless you can get that knee on their neck. And that's what we're dealing with. So I say all of that to say, we don't have a problem. We suffer from the problem, but truth be told, to the allies, those of you that are out there, we need you to collect your people. We need you to really have an honest conversation and try to move some of them folks, you know who they are, who it just don't matter. They have an issue with Black people, period. And it really doesn't matter what we do on our end, it's not gonna change their minds and hearts. So for those of you that those are your loved ones, the people that you with on Thanksgiving or July 4th or whatever, we need you to collect your folks and try to help them get into what is going on psychologically that they just hate us so much. That's my spirit.
Well stated, Tayam, but I know, Richard, you want to jump back in here. Let me just say that some of the questions that pop up, not necessarily in this panel, but from those that are potential allies, they want to know, what do you want? Do you want a Juneteenth holiday? Do you want to make sure Colin Kaepernick gets a job in the NFL? Do you want police reform? You know, what is the end game? And what is the response that helps keep activism active, and to make sure that, and as I think Chris put in the chat there, it's not necessarily a need for one particular figure to lead the way. I'm going to leave that out there before, and I'll get to Richard. And if anyone else wants to weigh in on that other comment that I made or that Tayemba made, you can do so after Richard gets a chance to speak again. Richard, go ahead.
I just wanted to comment on what Tayemba said about, you know, what is it that these people see where it's like you are so threatened by the freedom of Black people. And it's honestly, if anybody has ever looked at gene memory, or if anybody has any idea what that is, it's memory within your genes that it can't really be explained, but it's something that is acknowledged, where it's been passed down for generations, this memory of the criminalization of the Black image. It all started with, you know, one of the very first motion pictures that came out in America was a movie called Birth of a Nation. I don't know if you guys are knowledgeable about it, but it was one of the very first motion pictures. And the whole movie was about criminalizing the Black free slave and demonizing him, where there was actually no Black people in that movie at all. It was all white people in blackface. And they had him like a white dude in blackface crawling on all fours. And his whole goal was to rape white women. And it was the Ku Klux Klan who would be the savior of the white woman's chastity. So after that movie was released, there was a lot of lead up to that movie being released. They were burning crosses. They were doing a bunch of crazy, leaving nooses and stuff. Well, after it got released, the killings that were done by the Ku Klux Klan, just even by white neighborhoods, have went up exponentially. They were hanging Black people like crazy. They were burning them. They were killing them. And it's all because of a movie. And, you know, and that gene memory has seemed to have trickled down to a point where now it's like officers believe they're in fear for their life every time they see a Black person, or white people think every time a Black person's getting loud, they're being threatening. It's gotten to a point where we literally can't do anything without being demonized or criminalized. And it's all due to, 400 years of oppression, and then another 100 years of pushing a narrative of the criminalization of the Black image. And you will see it in everything. If you really look, I took a class called Black Cinematic Tradition at East Bay, and it really explained the whole thing and the stereotypes that, are portrayed that we supposedly perpetuate. So I just wanted to answer his question, what is it? And what it is the historic criminalization of the Black image. And so the point is now with showing, if you're on social media, you see things like Black Boy Joy, Black Grads Matter, because we have to change that narrative now at this point. And in my opinion, we've made a lot of progress in the time span of 20 years, but we still have a long way to go. So it's going to take a lot more Black grads. It's going to take a lot more Black Boy Joy. It's going to take a lot more Black creatives, a lot more Black owned businesses, a lot more neighborhoods that are owned by all Black people that are run great, that are, it's like a whole century of criminalization that we have to change, plus a whole 400 years that we also have to, fight against. It's so deeply woven into our society that it's to a point where we believe it to a certain extent. In certain neighborhoods, you see someone, and you think they have a problem with you, but it's like, why? We don't got an issue. I don't even really know you like that. And it's like, we have to change all that. Personally, I've made a lot of change in myself where now I go out of my way to say, hello to Black people or hello to Hispanic people. I go out of my way, how are you doing? Make sure that we're both comfortable in the same space when I see them, because it's easy for us to be uncomfortable amongst ourselves and amongst people that look like us, because it's engineered into our gene memory, into our own ideology and the way that we maneuver to want to fight ourselves and hurt ourselves or people that look like us. So, and that I feel like that trickles down as well to a lot of this movement stuff. We're so spread thin, and different other sub movements are happening where it's making us fight amongst each other. And like, I forgot who was saying, but someone said we need to pick a movement. And personally, my movement is against police brutality. Like that's my personal, I guess, vendetta or something, because growing up, that's the most of what I've experienced. I've been around gang members, I've been around drug dealers and pimps and all of that. And the most problems that I had was, due to police brutality, and during even times where nobody was even doing anything wrong. We've been chased, we've been jammed up, we've been thrown against fences, we've been handcuffed, we've been pulled out of cars, we've been, so my personal thing that I'm going for is police brutality. Like, so I don't know what specific sub-movement everybody in this panel fights for, if it's just Black Lives Matter in general. My thing is Black Lives Matter, but police brutality, like specifically. So, yeah, that was just to touch on what Tyhimba said and stuff. Sorry if I've strayed too far away from.
All right. And I see Larry, looks like you're ready to jump on in.
Yes, because I see in terms of, some of my brothers and sisters have talked about system change. And one of those systems is our academic system. One of the greatest things that has happened in terms of technology, we talk about the internet, which gives people access to a lot of information. But the other thing is the smartphone, which allowed white people to actually see live streaming of what we go through as people. But yet in the educational system, they don't learn a lot about our history. And I think that, I've had so many, even Black folks who have come to me and say, I didn't know anything about Juneteenth. I didn't even know anything about what happened in Tulsa with Black Wall Street. I didn't know that this is what you guys were going through in terms of facing law enforcement. I didn't know that the police department came out of the slave patrols. They're learning all that stuff because it's being forced upon them through those live images and what they're now starting to see on TV. But when I was at Cal State Hayward, I was being forced to take US history classes that didn't teach me anything about my people. And when I went to the library and I did research and learned about their people, things like Abraham Lincoln really didn't free all the slaves. 13th Amendment did that. And he really wasn't about trying to free us. He was about trying to end the Civil War. I had professors who were giving me D's for that kind of information because I was just speaking truth. But they didn't want to hear it, and they weren't being required to hear it. And I think that in terms of the academic system, really, in terms of just the educational system in general, elementary, middle school, high school, and college, they need to learn our history because it's their history too. And if they would begin to understand that history, then we wouldn't be having these fights about reparations. They would fully understand that this country was built on our backs, and there wouldn't be such a need to debate it. And there wouldn't be a need to undermine it too, because when we really look at the history, there's a lot of groups of people that were oppressed in this country. Our red brothers, our yellow brothers, they were all oppressed, and they all need to be, we need to inform all people of their history in this country and how they were oppressed, so that we can deal with some of this institutional racism that has affected this society. And the last thing I'll say about reparations, I'm really concerned about that because I know that reparations were given to the Japanese people for having been interned during World War II. And it ended up being like $22,000 per descendant of those Japanese people that were interned. And I'm looking at our history and saying, this country has made millions, then billions, and then trillions of dollars off of our backs. So I'm really concerned when you talk about reparations, what is that going to be? Because I really think that it has to deal with economics, the economic system, and again, further economic system change, as opposed to just trying to pay Black people off. I don't want 40 acres and a mule. I want more than that, because we're owed more than that.
Sounds like a big number. And as Chris Moore puts in there, money and adjustable income, land grants. You know, when you were mentioning about the influence of technology, the cell phone with a camera on it, reminds me of when Jordan first was introducing himself, and the T-shirt that you have there, Jordan, it says, you know, it's a statement that my execution might be televised. That's the cell phone, the handheld ability to share the experiences that we're all seeing and bringing it into the faces of everyone, that has made a big difference. Hey, I'm going to pivot a little bit to check in with our host, because I know that we're getting close to a time check. So Ms. Monica, just want to check in with you on our timing and how we might continue to proceed, especially in consideration of all the wonderful participants that we've had, not only in the panel, but in the attendance audience there. Monica?
So we are at 6:30. This is scheduled till 7. We have 2 more questions.
All right. Good.
Do you want me to read a question off for you, or do you want me to?
Please, because I don't see it here in the chat. If you could go ahead and read that question. Thank you.
Okay, the question is from Zachary. What role can things like comedy and storytelling have in creating direct positive effects for social, institutional, cultural, and systemic change?
All right, so what role can things like comedy and storytelling have in creating direct positive effects for social, institutional, cultural, and systemic change? Richard, go ahead, start us off.
I just, like, is that implying like media, like movie type things as well, or is it just?
In my interpretation, it seems like what are forms of new media and entertainment, how are they used in the change of the social structure? So like music was a big part of the civil rights movement. Plays and the Harlem Renaissance was a big part of the 1920s and the double victory movement. So it's like, how are entertainment and new media ways to change the social structure?
I think people like Jordan Peele, the creator of Get Out and a bunch of other movies he's trying to come out with, I think that it's already happening now with the decriminalization of the Black image. You know, like like I said in my last thing, it's all about we're trying to fight that image every day, you know? And it's like, if we step out of line or if we come off as standing our ground or anything, we're over the top aggressive. You're doing too much now. But that's not the case. We have to be silent in the face of oppression all the time. Like it's, you know, so I think it is important, you know, through storytelling, comedy, and all of any type of media, anything, because we have to decriminalize the Black image. Like, that's just it. Like, it's been a century of the criminalization of the image. And I hope it doesn't take another century to decriminalize it, but, you know, I think we're kind of on the right track right now. But yeah.
Alyssa, I see your hand there.
Yeah, I think for me, especially as somebody that works within entertainment, the number one thing is to change the narrative. We have so many works that are like trauma-based narratives to where we're constantly putting a certain type of image, like Richard was saying, in our people's minds, like not just in our own people's minds, but in other people's minds about us. So I think like if we change the narrative, even if we go so extreme to like create something that for Black people is essentially unimaginable right now. You know what I mean? So it's like, whether it be fiction, comedy, whatever the case may be, creating something that is almost unimaginable to where we can manifest that to make it happen, right? Because I think about things like how we watch movies, we watch commercials, we watch all of these things, and we have like these conversations about whether like life is imitating art or art is imitating life. So I think that like once we begin to change the narrative and we take our stances, whether it be a stance socially where you just want to show Black people being happy and carefree and just being Black, like without the trauma being associated with it, or whether you want to take that stance and utilize the trauma or utilize like a political stance or whatever the case may be, to push forth a certain narrative. I think that is what's most important, because at the end of the day, there's so many things that we've seen in film, in television, that are manifesting right now in real life. You know what I mean? So I feel like once we change the narrative, once we decide to be different, once we decide to encourage one another in a different way, like what if we did a movie that like wasn't focused on like the stereotypes, like the Black manly or the hypersexualized Black man or the whatever. Like if we did something that was separate from that, and really just tackled like certain ideas, like if we, I don't know, focusing on financial education, focusing on the Black family unit, focusing on all of these things that we want to happen. If we make that happen through our comedy, if we make that happen through our artwork, if we make it happen through film, if we make it happen through music, if we stop rapping about the drugs and guns or start rapping about history instead, you know what I mean? Like it's bringing a knowledge of self to our people, it's bringing a knowledge of self to the artist and the creator, and it's gradually changing the mindsets. Because I truly believe in my heart that like James Baldwin, I believe, is the one who said it when it came to white folks. He said they have to figure out in their hearts why it was necessary to have a nigga in the first place. And so I feel like on our end, we have to create our own reality. We have to create something other than what has been told to us. So I think ultimately, like I said, like it's changing that narrative. It's trying our best to promote positivity, promote change, promote financial literacy, promote carefree happiness, and just, yeah, it's changing that mindset. It's changing our mindset and changing that narrative.
Stan, we got a really good question that came in that we can do before the wind down. The question is, I would like to know the panel's thoughts on the difference between all Black Lives Matter versus Black Lives Matter. So that's the inclusion of the trans community, the LGBT plus community, Black disabled community, so on and so forth. So it says all Blacks Matter versus Black Lives Matter, but because we are dealing with either or, not both, I mean both and not either or, I would rather say all Black Lives Matter within the concept of Black Lives Matter without being mutually exclusive. If you people can do that for me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Monica. Panelists, need to hear the question again, or what are some of your thoughts on that? Jordan. And then Richard next.
I'll try to take a stab at that. So like for me personally, the All Black Lives Matters is something I just recently learned about, being kind of like said in the social media world. I think that I understand where it's coming from, because when we look at the Black struggle, oftentimes the Black trans experience is not acknowledged or not mentioned. And I think it's that community really just trying to say like, hey, we're included when it comes to hashtag Black Lives Matter, right? For me, it's interesting because like obviously I understand, you know, if you're Black, like you have your own struggle, especially given again your other identities. But I think for me, it saddens me that there's an assumption that people that state Black Lives Matter don't mean Black Lives Matter, right? Because you don't mean Black Lives Matter if you're not having, you know, other groups within the Black community in mind, right? And so I think that's something that within recent years has become more of an ongoing conversation. Like there's been more of a push to like mention that you know Black trans lives matter, yeah, I think really again it's just acknowledging that struggle, educating people about that experience, other Black people about that experience, and stating why their experience matters within this movement, right? So that's kind of my take from it. I don't see it as a negative or anything like that. I definitely think that, you know, again, it's a reminder, like, don't forget, like, if you're Black, like, inclusive of how you identify yourself. So that's my take on it. Yeah. Oh, Stan, you're mute.
Can you hear me?
Richard,
go right ahead.
I think, like I said, all of my opinions are based on understanding like history. Can you guys hear me? All of my opinions are based on understanding history. So like, you know, for this to be a question is due to the, you know, the hypermasculinity and a lot of the homophobia that is present in our communities. And a lot of that stems from, like I said, gene memory. You know, the women weren't the only ones getting raped on those plantations. You know, they were raping the strongest man in front of the whole plantation to prove a point. And predominantly, you notice in like Jamaican culture or West Indian culture that there's like a real like resentment towards the LGBT community. Not for all, but it's kind of like a culture. And what you could correlate that to is that Jamaica, the plantations in Jamaica were the main ones that had a lot of the male slaves that were raped in front of the plantations. I'm not sure if I read correctly, but I think it might have been where that method started, but I could be wrong. But you know, and so I think we have to recognize a lot of the things that we practice in our everyday lives are due to things we can't control and just things that are deeply woven within ourselves. And you know, I think you know, this is a question because there is a lot of homophobia and there is a lot of hypermasculinity in our communities, and for some reason masculinity is not associated with homosexuality. And it's even something that was that has been, you know, expressed by our own government during the Red Scare or the Cold War. Gay people were being locked up, imprisoned, and killed because the U.S. government felt that if you were gay, you didn't have the masculinity to uphold the principles of the U.S. You know, so it's like a combination of the criminalization of the Black image as well as, you know, the hypermasculinity stemming from slavery, stemming from different things that the U.S. government has pushed onto us. So I think that this is a necessary question because it is something that's swept under the rug and it's not very prevalent in our everyday thinking. And we have to understand the history to understand how to make a change and how to better ourselves. Yeah.
Oh.
Larry, I see you there. Go right ahead.
Yeah, I would piggyback what Richard said. You know, I'm happy to see here in Oakland at Lake Merritt, they have the letters on the street around Lake Merritt, and they do say more than just Black Lives Matter. They do have the letters LGBTQ+. And when you go to the Black Lives Matter website, you see that inclusiveness in terms of what they stand for and in terms of putting people from the LGBTQ community in leadership positions within the organization. And so I think that's the way that you really solve it, is you face it head on. It really makes me wonder, back in the 70s when we formed Student Unity Coalition and we were bringing together all these groups and Palestinians and Native Americans and Latinx and all these different folks. And when I reflect back, it's like, I don't know if we really had representation from the LGBTQ community, because back then, so many of those brothers and sisters were still in the closet, afraid to come out and share with everyone who they really were. My hope would be that if we had the LGBTQ community organized on campus at that time, we would have included them within the Student Unity Coalition. And I would hope that moving forward, that there would never be any separation in terms of the Black Lives Matter movement. Stan.
Thank you. Thank you. On that question, any others wanted to weigh in? Any other panelists wanted to weigh in on that? I do have a question. This will be our final question before we wrap up this panel. And it's about now that you are in the alumni community, for those of you who are more recent alums, what are you currently doing in activism? And what method or group do you support now? So what are you currently doing? And groups or methods that you are supporting now for our members of the panel. Let's see. Will I call on someone, or who wants to?
Yeah, I'll jump in.
Okay,
so
and Stacia, you're next.
Oh.
Go ahead, Tiamba.
Okay. Yeah, I actually just finished up 2 years on Cal State East Bay's alumni board. So somewhere in that process, actually, I was able to work a little bit more with Monica and do some things around student engagement. So as I've transitioned off the board, then I'll be working more closely with Monica around that. Again, co-founded a nonprofit in 2011. So Life Courses, we're still pushing through around financial literacy and entrepreneurship. You know, everything looks a little different now with COVID. So we just have to decide what it's going to look like for us moving forward. But my target is around financial literacy and entrepreneurship. So some of that will be with middle school students, some with high school students. There is a measure coming up on the ballot in November that is around supporting schools and getting cities more money. I don't have the name of the ballot measure right now, but certainly as an Oakland resident, if it's going to make some of these big companies in our area have to pay more of their fair share so that our schools and our cities could get more funds, then that's certainly something that I want to put my efforts around. So I'll be looking to do that as well. And then, you know, there's some opportunities for scholarships. You know, occasionally, again, I've donated to Cal State East Bay's Sankofa organization. And more recently, Until Freedom is an organization that I've donated to as well, because they're at two lines and out there, you know, doing the work and providing bail money, you know, to the protesters And I know that my protesting days are over. So, you know, I appreciate you young folks that are still out there, you know, pounding the pavement, and you know, I can do what I can do from my side of the fence.
What? No more protesting?
Man, listen. Why does this? Well, that's another story.
All right. Another time, another panel.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tayamba. Stacia.
As of right now, I'm still actively engaged with the faculty and like students in terms of the African American Resource Center. We actually just got off a Zoom call yesterday. And then also just making sure that like the baton is properly being passed to the Black leaders that are going to be at East Bay. So having conversations with the future BSU president, just asking her certain questions like, okay, how did you feel your leadership role was last year, and what things do you feel like you could have done different? What type of support do you need from people who were in your shoes a couple years ago or last year? And then also just providing like healing spaces for the Black community. I feel like sometimes we're so adamant about what's going on with us and things of that sort, like on a collective basis, and sometimes we forget that we need time to heal. And so just actually one of my friends I just like a couple weeks ago just did like a healing space over Zoom, like, hey, Black people, how are you feeling with everything going on? Because sometimes, like I said, we're so adamant about what's going on that we don't sit down and realize that we need to process, or we don't sit and realize that we're struggling with trauma. And so just continuously providing those spaces for us, and just allowing us to like kind of like refuel ourselves. You know, like we were talking about earlier, you can become so burnt out, but I think being amongst people that look like you and that act like you and have the same struggles as you can kind of give you that like fire to get you going again. And then also BCM, it's Black Campus Ministries. It's a Black Christian organization on campus that I was a part of. I've also joined their like alumni as well, because obviously not all Black people are spiritual or identify as having a relationship with God, but there are some people that do. And so always encouraging there to be like support in terms of mingling those two concepts together, because there can be a lot of controversy when it comes to your Christian identity, but also you being Black. And so just making sure that like other people are supported if they feel like those two intersect as well.
Very active, very active. Richard, I see your hand there. And Richard, you're muted right now.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes, we can.
Okay. I think the main thing that I'm doing right now is just, you know, spreading information, educating people where I can. And like I said, just doing the services that are inconvenient to me. Feeding people out here in LA with chapters of my organization that are down here. Just some different things. Also, I think ultimately it's important that we need opportunity over everything, because I think so many of us will thrive if we are just presented with the right opportunities at the right time. And so just one thing that I really want to do is literally, like people say, buy back the block. Like that's really what I want to do. I want to buy the block and provide opportunity to everybody that looks like me or people that I surround myself with, because personally, maybe from a real pessimistic standpoint, I feel like there's no place for us in this country right now. And we need to create more spaces for us that are ran by us. So yeah.
Right. Thank you, Richard. Let's see, Alyssa, please.
So currently right now for me, my main focus, or my two main focuses are media representation. So that's something that I'm doing in my field, where I am trying to make sure that we are properly represented, but also taking the reins with my own separate media company where I am taking control of the narrative as well, and giving that space and opportunity for other Black creatives to take control of their narrative and to promote themselves as well. And then my second route is focused on entrepreneurship. So two main folks that I support right now is Earn Your Leisure University and J. Morrison Academy. Earn Your Leisure because of the fact that they educate people in a variety of topics. And J. Morrison because he does the same thing, but more so in terms of financial literacy and learning how to build generational wealth. And that's kind of the route that I'm taking with myself as well, so that I can be able to, at the end of the day, be an example for the ones that are coming after me, for the ones that are right next to me, like just for everybody in general, just to be an example of what it looks like to actually own everything that is associated with me when it comes to my property, my business, my films, my music, whatever the case may be, like being that example for folks and showing that that itself can be activism.
It's a long way from protesting the water supply to inclusive activism. Thank you, Alyssa.
Mm-hmm.
Good. Others? Jordan? Yes.
Yeah, I talked a little bit about what I'm up to right now, but just to kind of like bring it back. So right now, the biggest thing I'm working on is the Hayward Community Coalition. Again, that's just a coalition of multiple community leaders, organizations who came together to work to defund the police and fund the community, given that the city budget was discussed last month. And so we're actively working towards creating community based campaigns to address police brutality, racism, but then also advocate where we can for other issues. For example, the school board is, we just need new people in the school board. So that's an effort where we're trying to shed light on issues that people may not be aware of. So we can, again, going back to local action, have people participate and be educated about who to vote for when it comes to local elections. And so that's, again, something that we're building right now. We're trying to make that sustainable. So even as time goes on, the community is taking the reins in terms of moving as a collective to make an impact. And then lastly, well, two things. One project I'm working on right now is the unification of Black and Brown people, given the fact that we have very similar experiences, right? Like right now, even though we have a different history, we have a different story to tell, but a lot of the issues that we face as a community overlap. So we're working to provide education to both communities in terms of where we overlap historically, you know, when we came together, but then also where our experience were one and the same, and be able to create the spaces for both of our communities to talk about what we need in terms of representation and progress as a people, right? Black agenda, Brown agenda. That, and then I work in tech, and so one of the biggest things the first thing you'll figure out when you work in tech is that there's not many Black people. And so if there's already not many Black people working in tech, there's not many Black entrepreneurs getting funded for their company. So thankfully I work at a company that tracks where money is going. And so right now I'm trying to plant the seeds for me to get into venture capital so I can be an advocate for Black entrepreneurs that have really good ideas, and be a connector to university students who may not even know that tech or entrepreneurialism is an option, and kind of highlight what that journey can look like so they can, you know, take their energy, take their ideas, and really build cool things. And so that's what I'm up to. And so if anybody wants to tap in, connect, especially build here locally in Hayward, feel free to connect with me. I'll kind of have my social media and contact information in the chat so you guys can check that out.
Spoken like a tech person. Have all your contact information available. And just for everyone, as a reminder, in the chat, our Alumni Engagement Office has been placing the websites for many of these areas that our panelists are currently active with or and have spoken of. So I hope that we'll be able to republish some of the chat information maybe on the Alumni Engagement webpage, so that if you miss it in this particular panel discussion, you'll be able to see it on the website.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Monica. And to bring us home, Mr. Larry Brooks, last but not least, what are you up to, and what kind of organizations, activities?
Well, I mentioned closing the gap, the work I do to help minority students go to college. Most of my attention right now is on Oakland and the challenges with child lead poisoning. Oakland's lead poisoning rate is higher than Flint, Michigan. A lot of people don't realize that. And that lead poisoning ends up affecting children's brains to where they are not very successful in school, which leads to them oftentimes not reaching the level of going to college and being able to then start careers. So I'm into that, as well as the asthma rate in Oakland, which is keeping a lot of children out of school because of asthma attacks, is also some of the highest rates in the state. So my focus right now is on preserving those children's lives in order for them to one day be able to go to college. Now, when I retire from that, I want to work more with Monica, because I still have a deep interest going back to when I was on the alumni board and doing a lot of research at the library on the history of the campus. You may recall I did a thing on the changes, the name changes that the university has gone through over the years in order to try to convince my Hayward brothers and sisters that it was okay to call it Cal State East Bay, because it had been called many other things in the past. And so I really want to do some more research into making sure we preserve the contributions that Black faculty and staff and students have made to the campus, and try to give the campus more of a welcoming feel, because we have a lot of buildings named after white professors and donors, and I hope that we'll have some buildings named after some of our Black contributors, if I can do the research in the library to prove that folks are worthy of that. And I'd like to see, Black Lives Matter letters, just like the big East Bay letters that I see up on campus now. And I think part of that comes again with being able to educate folks as to what we have contributed to the university, so that when future generations of students come onto that campus, it'll have more of a welcoming feel to it.
Very important. And another connection is this connection, not just the panelists here, but the other participants in our discussion. They, because of the format, they haven't been able to weigh in as easily, but we've got some real strong leaders, giants, if you will, that are part of our attendees, and I hope that they can be recognized in the wrap-up report for what we're doing here today, because they're some of my folks that I look up to, as well as those who have been real supportive of a lot of you as well. But with that, I want to thank everyone, and especially our panel members, Stacia Eckles, Larry Brooks, Alyssa Steverson, Tayemba Jelani, Jordan Leopold, and Richard Rodriguez for participating today.